When I was just a kid, about 12 years old, this wild event took place. It was a regular night, and I was in my room on the ground floor, just like any other kid trying to have some me time. The clock was ticking close to midnight, making everything seem even more mysterious. I was in bed, tossing and turning, trying to drift into sleep. See, I had a big problem with nightmares. They visited me quite often, making it difficult for me to have a peaceful night's sleep. Tom and Jane, my parents, had their room right above mine on the first floor. That night, while trying to catch some Z's, I suddenly heard strange and loud noises coming from up there. My first innocent thought was, oh, maybe Tom and Jane are just moving furniture or something. Wanting to drown out the noise, I put on my headphones. However, after a while, I cautiously removed one side of the headphones, hoping the sounds had stopped and I could sleep in peace. All was silent, so I assumed all was good. But as I lay there, with no music to distract me, I was suddenly jolted by the sound of glass breaking. It sounded like our upstairs living room window was being forced open. Panic set in, and like a rabbit sensing danger, I quickly bolted up to lock my door. All the silly thoughts I had earlier about Tom and Jane's activities vanished. Now, my mind was racing, wondering who could be in our house. My one hope was that Tom would somehow hear the noise and handle things. Overwhelmed with fear, I shouted, "Tom! Jane!" hoping they would come to my rescue. But instead of their familiar voices, I heard footsteps. And these weren't just any footsteps. They had a heavy, distinct sound. It reminded me of someone wearing big boots. I hoped against hope it might be Tom, but deep down I knew it wasn't. Every footfall echoed in the silence, growing louder as they came closer to my room. My heart pounded so loud that I thought it might give away my hiding spot. I was sure he'd be at my door any moment. Without a second thought, I dived into my closet, praying he wouldn't find me. It felt like an eternity, but then, all of a sudden, the footsteps stopped. He just stood there, not making a move. I quickly realized that shouting and making noise was a bad idea because it might tell him exactly where I was hiding. Now, you might be wondering, where were your parents during all of this? Well, it was a Saturday night and my folks enjoyed their drinks. They were fast asleep, not hearing a thing. Here I was, a kid, all alone on the lower floor, with an unknown man somewhere in the house. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad, like in the horror movies, was about to happen to me. I was beyond scared. Making things worse, both our family cars were parked outside. This means the intruder knew there were people inside. Who tries to break into a house knowing there are people inside unless they have a strong reason or are armed? The next thing I heard made my blood run cold. The basement door started to open and I could hear it creaking. Then, footsteps slowly coming down. My heart raced and fear took over, making me scream as loud as I could. The more scared I got, the louder I screamed. That's when I heard another familiar voice, my dad, shouting my name. By the time the intruder reached my door, my dad had also arrived. I heard gunshots. My dad had shot the intruder several times. I felt my dad pulling me out of the room, urging me to keep my eyes shut while we quickly left that horrifying scene. We immediately called the police. They confirmed the intruder had died. That night, Dad and I were questioned a lot, but our state has a law that allows you to defend your home and family. My dad wasn't charged with any crime. He was just protecting us. Later on, we learned more about the man. He had no home, was involved in drugs, and had been in trouble with the law many times. It seems nobody really missed him after that night. Several years ago, when I was about 9 or 10, a spooky thing happened at my grandma's house. Here's what I remember from that night, and it's something I can't easily forget. Back then, we lived in a far-off countryside. One evening, my parents had to leave for some work, so they dropped me off at my grandma's place. My grandpa was working the night shift, meaning only my grandma and I were at home. It was getting dark when my parents left, but my grandma and I thought we'd watch some TV to pass the time. It was around 10 in the night. We sat on the sofa, and soon both of us started to get sleepy. We were watching a mystery show, almost falling asleep, when suddenly a loud noise like glass breaking came from the basement. We were both so surprised. My grandma quickly went to the kitchen where the door to the basement was. I was close on her heels. The door to the basement was open. It looked like we forgot to lock it. In a hurry, my grandma found a small item to use to lock the door, since the real key was missing. Just when she managed to lock it, we heard footsteps coming up from the basement. When the person reached the door, we heard them trying to turn the doorknob. It was so scary. My grandma, acting quickly, took me to her bedroom. She got an old small gun that she had inherited from her dad. Holding it, she went to the main room and dialed my dad's number on her phone. While she talked to my dad, we could hear someone moving things around in the basement. It sounded like they were searching for something. My dad told her to keep the gun with her and stay safe. We waited for a while, and then the noises downstairs stopped. Even though we thought about calling the police, my grandma decided against it, thinking they would take too long to arrive and might not be of much help. After what felt like forever, my dad finally came. He had a gun and a flashlight with him. He checked the whole house, especially the basement. A window there was broken from outside. There were also signs that someone had searched the place. Bags were opened, and items were scattered everywhere. My dad stayed with us till my grandpa returned from his job. After that, he took me home, while my grandparents stayed back, making sure they had the gun nearby for safety. I don't think they ever called the cops. While I never saw who broke into the basement, just knowing someone was there and we were so close to meeting them still makes me feel uneasy. Even if it's not as wild as other stories, it's something I won't forget. When I was a little kid, my family and I lived in a tiny town. At first, I didn't like it, but as I grew up, I began to enjoy it. Living there had its downsides. For example, the closest store was 15 minutes away, and my family didn't have a lot of money. Even though I had a big, loving family, life was simple. Because we didn't have much, I didn't get to spend time with friends outside of home. I was taught at home instead of going to a regular school. Thankfully, I had a little brother close to my age. If not for him, I would have been super bored. We didn't mix with a lot of people. I'd say about 95% of our time was spent just among ourselves. My dad was out working long hours every day. Meanwhile, my mom stayed home, making sure my brother and I were okay. Picture this: a cozy house on a big plot of land in a place like Mississippi. The only thing you see all around is a huge cornfield. Our nearest neighbors, they lived a short car ride away. To me, that felt normal. But when I started visiting cities as I got older, I realized how different my childhood was. Okay, let me get back to my story. Being in the countryside means it gets super dark at night. No bright streetlights or anything. One night, I decided to sneak out. I wasn't planning anything naughty, but it was still sneaking since I wasn't allowed out that late without telling my mom or dad. Sometimes, I'd take a lantern and read a book outside, sitting on a hammock. Other times, if I was feeling really bored, I'd just hang out on the front steps. Yeah, I was an odd kid. But one of those nights, things got a little scary. Right when I stepped outside, I thought I heard voices. I was sure it wasn't my little brother or my parents, which left me wondering, who could it be? Looking back, I can't believe I wasn't more scared. I guess most folks would be pretty freaked out, especially kids my age. Maybe because I was just a kid, I thought everything was going to be okay. Trying to remember exactly how I felt is tough. But I think I was mostly just curious. So I decided to check out where the voice was coming from. It sounded like some mad dude. He might have been talking on the phone or something, but why was he near my place? Hiding behind a tree, I caught a glimpse of him. It was mostly just a dark shape, like a shadow moving with the night. He was walking kind of toward where I was. I don't think he saw me. For some reason, it took me a moment to get really scared. Then it hit me. This could be bad. So I started running back to my house as fast as I could. When I looked over my shoulder, he was chasing after me. I made it to the door just in time to lock it. But now this dude was right outside, banging on the door and yelling. He was saying he'd get inside no matter what. Scared, I went to find my dad. He grabbed his gun and yelled back at the guy without opening the door. For a brief moment, everything went silent. Suddenly, I heard the guy running off and the sound of footsteps on our wooden porch. We never heard from him again. My dad didn't call the cops. I guess he thought the trouble was over and the man wouldn't come back. After that, I had nightmares. Sometimes he'd come back when Dad was away, or sometimes the story played out differently and scarier. Luckily, in real life, he never returned, as far as I know. I believe my dad would have done anything to protect us. So that's my story about the night a strange man tried to break into our home and possibly kidnap me.